Hi, I'm your host Vasco Duarte. Welcome to the Scrum Master Toolbox podcast, where we share tips and tricks from Scrum Masters around the world. Every day, we bring you inspiring answers to important questions that all Scrum Masters face day after day. Hello everybody, welcome to our Team Tuesday this week with Mahesh Jade. Hi Mahesh, welcome back.
Hey Vasco, hi.
So on Tuesdays we talk about teams, but we always ask first, what was the book that most influenced you in your career as a Scrum Master?
Absolutely. So it goes back to a particular event, and it has been my practice that I would always go to the meetups and I would speak to people at conferences. And I think more than theory or anything else, these conversations have helped me. And as a result of that, I think I was at one of the conference at Mumbai, and there I got a book signed by Michael Hubman, and that book is called Evolve Agility. And because it was a self-signed book, it actually meant a lot to me. It actually became a guiding light. And it talks about developing the inner agility before we look for the outer agility. And a lot of things they have mentioned, they talk about whenever we look at a particular thing, we come up with a certain thought and we start proceeding on that. But if we take a back seat and if we just try to understand more about that thought and where it is coming from, maybe that analysis and that inner agility really starts showcasing into the work. So that have been my favorite book. And just to mention another one, it is a pretty old book that I have read, but it is titled Running an Agile Software Development Project. So interestingly, this book was on Agile projects, but the last chapter in that book was about the health and the daily routine of the person, a Scrum Master or an Agilist, and that was truly good. I learned from that maybe our way of working and our physical energy gets converted into our mental energy, and we have to focus a lot. So if we are going out, if we are playing and spending some time on exercising, I think that vigor and that playfulness or that intention to build strength, that starts showcasing into our work. So those are my two favorite books and favorite chapters from that.
Absolutely. You talk about inner agility. I would like to explore that a little bit more from the perspective of the Scrum Master. So if you had to describe what inner agility is for other Scrum Masters that are out there now listening to this episode, how would you describe that?
Yeah, I'll try to give my best shot at it. So I think we were building a house 2 years back. And I observe some of the people which are not from software or which are not particularly from any particular industry that we refer to when we refer to Agile. But they were doing some practices on their own in terms of doing something and then teaching the same thing to another guy on the next day. The people building the house, they used to have quick meetings at the end of the week. And it is very informal, but they will talk about actually what went good and what went wrong. So from there, I think I discovered that inner agility is about observing how other people are doing and what is actually helping them being successful in any space. It could be really inside the software or manufacturing or any other place. But if we develop that eye for observing the habits of successful people or some of the behind the scenes that goes behind something successful, then I think that helps building that inner agility.
Absolutely. Learning from the best, as they say. There's this phrase, I don't know exactly who said it, but the phrase goes something like this: you are the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. So definitely one important thing is to really pay attention to what's around us and make sure that we are helping others, of course, but also helping ourselves and surrounding ourselves with people that can bring energy, that can give insights, that can help in moments of difficulty, for sure.
Absolutely. And that's my favorite quote as well. I have also read it quite sometimes.
Absolutely. So on Tuesdays, though, Mahesh, we talk about the teams and how sometimes they become their own worst enemies. So walk us through a story of a team that, went through a process of developing a behavior or a pattern over time that ultimately led to trouble. So walk us through that story step by step, starting by when, for example, you first met the team. Walk us through that story.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think I got a chance to work in multiple projects at multiple organizations, and there were people who came from a background who never had an experience into working into Agile. So those have some stories and there were people who were actually into agile from very long time. So also they had some patterns. So if I had to look back at the first thing that I was trying to narrate, when people are completely new into agile, so we keep talking about continuous improvement, and sometimes the message may become that people are getting into a zone of continuous correction, in terms of every now and then if somebody is working on something, somebody will think, I because we are agile, I have an opportunity to go and correct that person. So from that background, I think in one of the organization and in one of the project, things were not going pretty well. And
So what was happening? What was not going well?
yeah, so one particular person will try to identify the flaws or the mistakes in what other people are working at, and he will take an opportunity to quickly call that out in a way that will make somebody uncomfortable or not really valued for what he is doing. So that was the context for that. And I think so what I did into that situation, I remember I took some time, and that was happening with everyone, and sometimes the pulse of the team was not very good with that particular person. And then I waited for some time until there is a right time for a discussion to have. And in that discussion, I remember I was talking to the person, and we started talking about being kind versus being right. And that was the discussion we had around whenever we get a chance to propose an improvement or propose a correction, maybe we have to just take a call whether it is a time to be right or it is time to be kind. Because in general, human, before buying in any idea, people look to buy in that person first. So from that background, I think that was a pretty good story. So he understood the essence of that discussion, and he started practicing being kind first before being right. And that resulted into a very good rapport. Even the team was happy that one of the person who were they were finding little difficult to engage with, now it is a completely changed scenario, and they are having very good discussions, very good rapport in the beginning, and then they are following that conversation into what can be improved or what can we do differently. That went pretty well.
Yeah, actually, that what you just described, we've had some similar stories previously here on the podcast when somebody in the team focuses on the negatives rather than on the positives. It kind of creates this illusion, because it's not reality, that there's a lot of bad things going on because we only talk about the bad things, right? I usually say you need to choose whether you want to focus on the good or the bad things, because whatever you focus on, you get more of it.
Yeah.
And taking that dynamic, kind of changing that dynamic, is an incredibly important role for Scrum Masters. And you talked about this, having this conversation of, being kind versus being right, which may be a very practical way to have that conversation. But walk us through that conversation. Like, how do you bring that topic to that person who probably thinks that they are doing the right thing for the team, right?
Yeah, I remember the context in a very deeper detail. So I think one of the things that I have done is that I have not landed into that conversation in the very beginning. I have taken some time until the ground is ready for that discussion, because unless somebody have that hunger or maybe some realization that something is not really going very right, and it is going to create some problem maybe for themselves, because as a human, generally people try to create some safety around them. And I don't totally believe into that. I think as a scrum master, we should take people towards being more free and than being seeking safety into the for one's career or one's thing in that matter. So I think I took some time. I some of the things developed, and he started realizing that okay, this is not going really right way, and he's developing some negative feedback around him. And on that note, I think I just struck that conversation. And I think because I chose the right time to have that conversation, that went pretty well, because there was a space for that conversation, and that just got fit in together.
And of course, people listening might say, okay, but how do I know that the time is right? And that's actually a question we can spend some time on, right? So how did you know that the time was right? What was the signs that told you that, okay, now is the right time to have this conversation?
Yeah, so it was actually pretty much evident that some of the conversations started happening in the team, and people started discussing about these things offline, and people were taking some time to discuss that. And sometimes that those conversations will just go out, and somebody will get a hint of that. And eventually, it was very evident because some of the senior people entered into some of the conversations and they started talking about it. And because some senior people started talking about it, then the particular person, he felt a need that okay, something has to be done, and he had that inner urge that can somebody really help me, because he used to think that whatever he is doing is for the good of the team as well as for him. So he did not have the understanding of the approach that is going wrong. His intention was right, just the problem with the approach. And I think with that notion, I understood that maybe it has reached up to some in an escalated way or some other levels of discussion. I thought now it is the right time to become a coach and to provide some valuable advice which he will find very helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. And sometimes a simple question like, how is that working out for you? How do you feel about the feedback you get from the team? Can trigger the reflection in the team member to then say, yeah, that's not really working well. So how do I change it?
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you for sharing that story, Mahesh.
Cool. Absolutely. Wonderful.
Tuesday is Team Day here on the Scrum Master Toolbox podcast. But tomorrow we talk about something that goes beyond the work we do with the teams. We will talk about how to lead change and what our guests have learned from leading and participating in change programs during their career. See you tomorrow. We really hope you liked our show. And if you did, why not rate this podcast on Stitcher or iTunes? Share this podcast and let other Scrum Masters know about this valuable resource for their work. Remember that sharing is caring.